City Locks. Another good week of football in the books. We brought our guests back this week. We got a lot to get into, but we're just going to jump right into the meat of things. Give y'all a little rundown of my mid-major teams. Missouri got absolutely trounced. Fraudulence confirmed, 34 to nothing in Bama. They still need 4 wins to cover that win total. UNC righting the ship, getting the dub versus Virginia. A little too late, in my opinion. But they won 41 to 14. Arizona with a heartbreaker to West Virginia. I don't understand that team. They're all over the place. They need 5 more wins to cover their total. And Washington loses to Indiana. They are 4-4. Another very confusing team. They need 3 games to cover that total. So we shall see. In terms of our pick'em that we're doing, I had another good week, 5 weeks in a row placing, getting money. I got second place, went 10-6, and I moved to 89 and 80 on the season with a 52.66 hit rate. Wes 9-7, 10th. He is at 81 and 88, 47.93. So that's where we stand with Pick'em and the mid majors that I have picked. Let's jump into the recap. Couple spicy games to go over. We got a big game in College Station, Oregon playing Illinois. Let's start with them. Oregon absolutely trounced Illinois. I don't even think we really need to get into this too deep. I think this confirms sort of what we talked about. Illinois was kind of fraudulent. We weren't really sure if they were that good. They beat a crappy Michigan team, and I think this confirmed it. They got steamrolled.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I mean, but I, to Oregon's credit, at this point in the season, a ranked win matters. It's,
Yeah,
and it was a team that everybody was pretty high on with Illinois. Everybody kind of thought that they were good, and good for Illinois. I think that this season, if they're able to win out, we could chalk that up to a solid season for them, and
sure.
big things to come. So Illinois's got a lot to look forward to, in my opinion. And then I think it further solidifies Oregon as the number one team in the country. Like I said, ranked win, that's huge, especially when you demolish the team that you're playing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Illinois, not every team's going to contest for the college football playoff, and that's okay. They're a solid team, a good team, even. They're just not in the same weight class, and it really showed.
Yeah. Not much to go over there, but definitely agree with what you said, Hunter. If they win out or maybe draw one more, I don't know. I think that this will be a win for them. Definitely a lot to look forward to. Let's talk about Ohio State, Nebraska. Ohio State holding on, winning late, 21 to 17 versus a Nebraska team that is now 5-3, 2-3 in conference play. But if I'm Nebraska, we want to, what do we say? We don't really want to take a moral victory here, but it's kind of hard not to. I think this is big for a program that, was the pinnacle of college football, has fallen off and has started to see a glimmer of hope. They have a couple big wins this season. And if they beat Ohio State, man, that changes everything, but just barely couldn't get it done. If I'm Ohio State, though, I'm starting to get worried about that Big Ten championship game, potentially getting in, winning it. What happens later in the season? I'm worried.
There are some recent, developments, I think, meaning this season in terms of like middle of the pack, typical Big Ten teams. I mean, Illinois, Indiana, and Nebraska are three teams that I would argue have been relatively surprising. Indiana paramount among the rest of them in terms of their success. Nebraska has, like Illinois, has a lot to look forward to. I think Dylan Raiola is a pretty good quarterback. So there's a lot going on over there in Lincoln too, and who knows? Maybe next year we're talking about an undefeated Nebraska.
I mean, shout out to all these Big Ten coaches able to rally all their players. They might not be coming from the most star-studded programs, but they know how to rally their troops. Felt a lot like Rocky watching it, where they got the moral victory, but not the real win. And Ohio State just continues their trend of they're in the heaviest weight class there could be, but they do not play cleanly. And when they get into these close games, they're in big trouble.
Yeah, and the stat sheet is interesting. I mean, they threw for 220 on it, but they only rushed for 64. Nebraska running for 121 on them. Raiola, he passed for 152, no touchdowns, one interception. If you'd shown me that before, I don't know that I would say that this would be a 4 point game. So it's kind of that's what I'd be most worried about. Not really who I like what you said, Hunter. I think he's a great quarterback, but this was certainly not his game. And the fact that it was still a ball game, it's very, very interesting to me. I mean, they really limited Ohio State's rushing. Will Howard had a pretty solid game, only throwing one pick, but Nebraska's outside of, a good run game, they only got one touchdown on the ground. Very confusing to me. So a lot to unpack there. I'm worried if I'm Ohio State. That's basically what I got to go to for you. Another big one, Grant. I'm sure you have a lot to say about this. Vandy, 3 points short from another shocking upset. They dropped to Texas 27-24.
I was hoping for this. I thought they were full of magic. I thought they could pull it off. They were very, very close. I would love to say that if they had a little bit more time, they would have pulled it off. I don't think it would. That's true though. Vandy did exactly what I wanted them to do. They controlled the clock as much as they could, and they contained this Texas offense. But when it really came down to it, their offense is just not there yet. It's so close. I do think they're very dangerous and are going to be far from any Vandy team of the past. They are going to be a tough out for any SEC team, and the fact they're not ranked is crazy to me.
Unfortunately, college football is not March Madness, and it's hard to sustain that kind of magic for a long time. I thought Texas was going to win. I thought they were going to cover. I was wrong about that. So Vandy definitely proved me wrong in one regard. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think you made a pretty good analogy, Grant. Fighters can fight up a little bit for a while, but at some point, you're just the magic runs out a little bit. I mean, these are teams that we're talking about with insane depth. They've got studs from
Yeah.
across the country that are playing, sitting, that are riding the bench, just itching to play ball. Whereas Vandy doesn't have that same kind of recruiting pool. They don't have the same kind of talent that these teams have, and they get gassed, and they just can't. You can't hang with the big dogs all the time. I'm not going to take away from anything the team's done this season. I think that they played a good game, and I think that beating Alabama is a banner that they're going to hang in Nashville. And rightfully so. I mean, that's huge for their program. And hopefully we're having a different conversation in 2-3 years from now about Vanderbilt, and they're kind of like an Indiana or an Illinois, and they're kind of some kind of emerging perennial contender. Would be cool. It'd be really fun to see like college football flipped on its head that way.
Yeah, when you don't have that depth, it just comes back to bite you. When you turn the ball over 3 times, it hurts you eventually. But if I'm Texas, I'm a little worried about this as well. I mean, they left the door open for them. I mean, they had what I think they had an 11-point lead at half, and Vandy outscored them in the second half. So they really never shut the door on them. They turned the ball over twice. Sloppy game. But yes, this is a Vandy team that has a lot of intangibles that I think make them fun to watch, and scrappy is the best way to describe them. So definitely, again, I feel like we're talking about a lot of moral victories here, but a moral victory for Vandy. Don't hold your head down too long.
Got
But
so
yeah,
much gumption.
yes, exactly.
To make a quick point, kind of like one of the encouraging things about Raiola and Nebraska is something similar that you see with Pavia and Vandy is
Hmm.
their ability to rally their teammates and
Yeah,
people wanting to play for them. It's something that's been missing with like a quarterback like a DJ Uyunglele, who might have the like on his sheet, on his combine sheet, he might hit every metric a scout would want in an athlete, but he doesn't have that intangible, aspect of his gameplay that makes people want to play well around.
exactly. Um, Also big game, probably the marquee matchup of the week. A&M big win at home versus LSU. That's a huge win for that program. Um, and Weigman, man,
I was right that he
ran.
was not good, but it doesn't matter.
Didn't matter. It
Hey,
was
next
not
man
a,
up.
God.
Next man
Next
up.
man up.
what was his name? Number 10 for A&M. He's got legs.
Marcel. It's Marcel Reed.
Yeah, I mean,
He had 4 dropbacks and he threw for more yards than Connor Wegman.
insane. Yeah, talk about the next man up mentality. 70 yards, and then he did it with his legs. I mean, we saw some crazy plays from him on the ground. 3 rushing touchdowns. You imagine your backup quarterback, lights are bright. Kyle Field, one of the biggest, most intense atmospheres. They're like, all right, here are the keys to our offense. And he's like, all right, I'm just going to casually pass for 70 yards, no touchdowns. Doesn't matter. I'm going to run for 3 of my own as well. And run for 62 yards. Just stellar performance. That's the X factor that you need in a game like this, where we said that these teams matched up really well. There's going to need to be a breakout player. I did not think that it would be A&M's backup quarterback, but they got the job done. I don't think that the box score really reflects how close this was for a lot of the game at all, but they control their own destiny now going forward.
It's a great point that Kyle Field, not only is home field dangerous for opposing teams, but if you're inexperienced and it's like your first time playing in front of this massive crowd, it's an important ranked matchup against an SEC opponent, and you're able to do that. Oh man, that galvanizes the troops. They are going to go on a run.
For sure.
I've gotten to where I refer to this kind of phenomenon in college football as the Tua Tagovailoa effect. When you have it's super impressive when you have a second string quarterback that can, come out and showcase how good they can be and break away from the field. Now the hope would be that the rest of the season goes really well for Marcel Reed. I think you said what his name was. The rest of the season goes well for him. Hopefully, you don't see any kind of regression in the second year.
For sure. Definitely a big win for A&M. We don't really need to get into it too much, but Notre Dame just absolutely steamrolled Navy. Just go ahead and end that.
I was wrong, and I'm sad. I'm sad for America.
I was wrong too.
We all
It was a sad day for America, but we still have Army.
Yeah, they've taken out the Navy, but the Army still stands. Last thing for recap this week, the AP poll. We got to have a sit-down conversation. Outside of that top 5, we got some serious problems here.
Terrible.
Okay?
Awful.
Why is 8-0 BYU sitting behind Notre Dame and Tennessee? They have quality wins. They haven't lost yet. They're in a Power 4 conference.
They played one more game.
This is ridiculous.
It's pretty terrible. AP poll, if you're watching, thank goodness this is the last week of you guys getting a rank because this is awful. This is terrible.
We don't need this anymore.
Notre Dame, who's lost to NIU, who made it into your awful poll for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then they jump 4 points or 4 spots after beating Navy. What is this? What are we doing here, guys? This is a joke.
Hour.
April, it was months ago. April Fool's is over, long past. We need to shape up over there.
Oh, man,
Indiana,
it's so bad.
What are they? Why is LSU ahead of 7-0 Pitt, 7-1 SMU? You could even make an argument. Why is Ole Miss up there either? Like,
why
this
is
crazy.
LSU ranked? Why is LSU ranked?
From about around 13 down, it's bad. Missouri shouldn't be on there at all. I mean, they have had 2 embarrassing losses.
If we're gonna have a 2-loss team on there, make it Vandy. If we're gonna have a 2-loss team at 25, make it Vandy.
Not anymore. They're 3 losses now.
Well,
it's just ridiculous criteria that has plagued this poll for years. It's only egregious nowadays because it's not clear cut, and we don't, because now we have to care about the top 12 instead of just the top 4 or 5.
Yeah,
which they usually get right as the top echelon of teams. But at least we're top 12, where it matters. We're going to get a lot more of the good teams, but half your list is just wrong.
Having it the way that it is right now, I mean, if this is the playoff, right, and they're taking teams to the playoff right now, we've got tons of teams getting snubbed, and we have a 12 team getting snubbed because Clemson and Iowa State are tied at 11. So that's awful. There should be no ties. I think Clemson's fairly rated. I'll be honest. I do think that the AP shows a little bit of SEC bias. Got to get it in there. I do think that that's how it is. I think that's why Missouri's still ranked. But it is what it is. But this list is the worst rankings that we've seen this season easily.
Yeah, for sure. It's ugly. But
Indiana's looking in.
It'll be a moot point very soon. But moving on to the following week, we got a couple big matchups. Not as great of a slate as others, but we have a big one, which is a night game. No, psych. Ohio State at Penn State, noon game. Just don't understand why we're doing this still. We did it last year. I don't know the last time that we didn't do this. But yeah, it's disappointing to say the least. I think this is going to be a good game because I think that last year I said the same thing, and Ohio State always ends up winning. But I think that these teams match up very comparably. Ohio State's offense putting up about 472 yards a game. Penn State's right in there around 464. Ohio State scores around 40 points a game. Penn State are in the 33, so slight edge there, but it's comparable. Their defenses both allow around that 10 to 15 points and 250 to 270 yards a game. So they match up really well. I think we're at the point in the season where these stats are a little more like, okay, we know people have different resumes, but we can start to look at them. We're developed, we're 6, 7, 8 games in. So on paper, I think that this should be a pretty good matchup. I think that Ohio State's like 4-point favorite right now, which I think you could argue either way, but I feel like that's pretty good right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with you. I think that there's two things with Penn State that we've got to think about. One is a pro. Drew Aller has shown a great deal of progression this season compared to last
Definitely.
season. Their offense looks a lot better in general across the board. They started out pretty slow this season. He did not look great in their first game, but now they're kind of cooking on offense. The second thing is one of the intangibles that we've kind of been talking about. Does James Franklin have it in him to win a big game? Does he have it in him to win a big game, and what would put Penn State at number 2 in the rankings? In my opinion, if they're able to pull this out against Ohio State, they should be the second-ranked team in the country. That would be the highest ranking Penn State has experienced in the Franklin era. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not convinced. They played USC a few weeks ago, and it was pretty bad. That was pretty
Yep.
bad. I mean, and USC is not a good team.
They
They're
are
I
not
mean,
a
not.
good team.
they keep slotting this at noon or so just to give Penn State a chance. I mean, it's like the Kirk
Real.
Cousins of the college football. They can't play in night games at all. The problem with Penn State every year is they'll be ranked highly, justifiably so, because the roster's insane from top to bottom, because they are great at recruiting. But the second they have to play against a team of equal strength, they fall apart. They're used to rookie crushing, we'll say.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say on the Ohio State side of the ball, Will Howard is, I mean, he's got some solid stats on paper. He threw 1 pick last week, 3 touchdowns. So I think he's a good quarterback. And I think I'm going to stick with what Hunter mentioned and what I've seen over the years. I don't know. I haven't seen anything to show me that they have it in them yet. I think that Ohio State's loss to Oregon is a quality loss. Penn State, we've really seen them struggle this season against certain opponents. That USC win gets less and less valuable every week as USC slides more and more. And they almost lost to Bowling Green. So I think that I'm going to stick with Ohio State here. And I just don't see an end to Penn State. They're the Sisyphus of college football. They just keep pushing that boulder. They're never going to get to the top, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, I had a roommate when I first moved up to Washington that is a Penn State grad, so I'm gonna ride with the Nittany Lions this weekend in honor of Austin. I want to see them win. I like Penn State. I think they're a cool program. There's a lot of history out there, and the fans are super passionate. Never met a bad Penn State fan in my life either.
For sure.
And so I'm rooting for them. I hope they win. I'm gonna take them money line at plus 135.
I mean, aside from the very real intangibles of Penn State program, the real thing is going to come down to whether or not Penn State can actually use this star-studded defensive line to get pressure on Will Howard. And while they're really good at doing it against non-NFL caliber offensive lines, Ohio State always has a NFL caliber offensive line. And Penn State, if anybody watches a lot of NFL scouting, they would know Penn State edge rushers are infamous for not having a bag. They are going to out athlete you, or they're not doing anything at all. So that's the key thing to watch: is the tackles versus the edge rushers, which amazingly might actually work this time. I know it's like you said, Sisyphus, but I think it might work this time. Ohio State,
pushing.
if for 1 year, does not have these ultra elite tackles, I think Abdul Carter on Penn State might be able to do it. And if he can, they might be able to get to Will Howard, who, like Garrett Nussmeier, performs terribly under pressure, like abysmally. And he's going to throw interceptions. He's going to fumble. He's going to do something. As we saw from the Oregon game, he has bad intangibles.
Yes, he makes some bonehead plays. We saw that. Grant and we watched that live, couldn't believe it. But yeah, so that's going to be a good game. Couple other ones that I want to highlight. Arkansas at Ole Miss. This one catches my eye just because Arkansas, I think, is one of my favorite scrappy teams. They're 5-3. They got a win over Tennessee. They get killed by LSU. They destroy Mississippi State. They beat Auburn. They hold A&M they lose to them by 4 points. They're all over the place. On paper, They have a very productive offense. I think they put up the like fifth or sixth, seventh most yards in the country, around 482 a game. They're scoring 33.3 points a game. There's a lot to like here. Ole Miss, on the other hand, I have doubts about them. They beat South Carolina, but the past two games they lost to LSU. Not a convincing win against Oklahoma to me. I think that they are very up and down as well. However, Ole Miss here is favored by 8 points on the road. I think that the Hogs covering here is going to be a good play. I think that that's probably one of my favorite plays this week.
Look, Ole Miss is in the Lane Kiffin era at Ole Miss. They're known for incredibly high-powered offense, moving the ball down the field and making you keep up with them. So that's going to be the big question for Arkansas this weekend: is if they're actually able to keep up with what Ole Miss can do offensively. I think Ole Miss has better quarterback play. Really not a lot to say about this on my end, other than Ole Miss is playing. They have to win. They absolutely have to win. And Arkansas loves being a day ruiner.
It feels like we do this every year. Arkansas, it's unimpressive to start usually, and then suddenly towards the end of the season, wow, Arkansas is so underrated. Wow, they're such a tough team to play against. It happens every year.
Yeah,
They're just slow starters, I suppose. This Ole Miss team has the same kryptonite as every other Ole Miss team, which is if they do not get this deep ball going, they are going nowhere. They do not run. They do not try to win through defense, despite the fact they have some pretty good talent this year.
I was going to say their defense this year is surprisingly not bad, like 11 points a game.
This Arkansas team, they put up a lot of offense, although some of it is a little bit inflated. But whose offense isn't inflated at this point against bad teams? Arkansas, I think you're definitely right that this is a very good bet of covering 8 points. Are you kidding?
It's pretty big.
I would take Ole Miss to win this game, but Arkansas, I was going to keep it close.
Yeah, I think that that's a good one. I mean, watch them hang 50 on them, and Arkansas just forgets how to throw the football. But no, I think that if you're just going to go objectively, what jumps off the page to me, this is a good one. So fun one to watch. Another ranked matchup this week, Pitt at SMU. We saw Pitt dismantle Syracuse last week, a Syracuse team which I don't think is crazy good, but definitely wouldn't write them off. Quality win for them for sure. And it really looked like they just picked them apart. Syracuse put some points up in garbage time, but they never were in that game at all. And SMU, they've only lost one game, right? Who did they lose to?
BYU.
BYU, a quality loss. So I think this is going to be a fun game. I don't really have anything in terms of a bet on it. Just wanted to highlight. I think the Pitt is actually legit. I think the SMU is a pretty solid team. So one I'll be watching. I would lean towards Pitt in this, but I think Grant has something here that is going to tell me that I shouldn't be thinking that.
So to contrast from the Ole Miss Arkansas game, which is all about offense, Pitt SMU is going to be all about defense and all the gritty trench warfare that us football truists love.
Yeah.
This Pitt and SMU, although relatively balanced teams in terms of passing and running, Pitt absolutely depends on their run game to get anything going. They need to get this run game going in order to open up at least a little bit of this passing game. And SMU's best trait is their run defense. So if they need to get through this SMU interior defensive line to win the game, I don't think that's happening. Especially because SMU's just played solid all year. They're consistent. They have very low volatility for a ranked team. So I think SMU is just going to dominate them.
I think this game, this kind of like how Grant's mentioning, is going to be a defensive struggle unless Pitt's able to kind of pick them apart offensively with their run game. I think the over at 57.5 is pretty generous, so I'd probably be taking the under on that game if I was going to bet. That would be what I would be looking to throw money on. And I think that absolutely occurs unless one of the team is able to exploit something in the other that they've seen in film. SMU beat the crap out of FSU, who's pretty awful. But I mean, going into or playing FSU in general, I think they're just one of those teams where, like, even if we had a bad Bama, they're just FSU's kind of one of those teams that you always kind of got to look out for. Pitt 5 picks against Syracuse. It made Kyle McCord, who had for whatever reason entered the Heisman conversation, look like a JV player. I mean,
Yeah,
it was pretty terrible.
3 pick sixes.
Pretty terrible, terrible. And now whether that was quarterback play or whether that was the defense flying around, it'll be kind of interesting to see if Pitt's able to emulate that again.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to. He forgot like they wear orange. They're pretty different colors. I don't understand what was going on there. Real quick, wrap up with our last game. A&M on the road at South Carolina, only a 2.5 to 3 point favorite. The South Carolina feels like the Arkansas of the East to me. They're very scrappy. 2 point loss to Bama. Get blown out by Ole Miss. What do we make of this team? I don't know. They trounced Oklahoma, who I think is terrible. A&M though, humming right along. I don't really know that I've seen anything to make me turn away from A&M here. I feel like they've got it running, and a high key. I feel like if they have their backup quarterback in, I feel even more confident about this because I think that he's better than Wiegman. So I'm gonna stay with A&M here until some crazy injury report comes out, and I am turned off of this. But I think that A&M on the road here, I don't see anything to convince me they're not getting the dub here.
Yeah, look, I hate South Carolina. I'd love to watch. I'd love to watch them lose every single game. That being said, they've played some decent teams close this season. They might kind of be like an Arkansas ditto, able to kind of scrap with some of the best of them, but not really kind of edge out the win that they need. Unlike Arkansas, they don't have a marquee win like the one over Tennessee that Arkansas has.
Mhm.
I mean, we kind of keep going back to it, but the LSU game, you can maybe argue was a bit of a ref show. Might
Yeah.
give them one of those moral victories that we're talking about. But I'm not going to give South Carolina anything. I'm picking Texas A&M, and I hope Texas A&M wins by a bazillion. And I hope that South Carolina probably disbands their football team after the game. So
I love this game. If you just look at it from top to bottom, there's just so much volatility. This game is not going to go the way we think it's going to go, even if the scores are somewhat uh, correct to the spread. South Carolina is a team that's funny to me. It's the only defense first team I know of that's volatile. Like it's
Mhm.
purely depends on whether or not this edge rusher can get pressure or their corners can somehow get interceptions. Texas A&M have this bottomless pit of backups to do whatever. It's
Yep.
not just the quarterback; they've had injuries all across the team. Both lines, their backfield, their
Yeah.
DB, but they
We
just have
said
so much talent.
we said that the recruiting was there this whole time. They just needed to give the car keys to the right person.
It's like a shark's tooth or a shark
Yeah.
teeth. It's just
Just
rows
keep
and
coming
rows.
back.
The second one breaks, the other one comes in just
Yeah.
as sharp. I'm going to take Texas A&M to beat South Carolina, but this game, I'm not. I'm going to stay away from this one in terms of actual live money. This thing can go either way. It can go. South Carolina could blow them up. Texas A&M could blow it up. I have no clue what's going to happen in this game.
Yeah.
it makes you wonder what the heck Jimbo Fisher was thinking because they were terrible while he was
He's thanking Jameis Winston for a natty.
there.
That's gonna wrap it for this week, y'all. Yeah, how do you get a W? um, I think there's some interesting games in there somewhere after that 12 o'clock game. We'll scoot around, take a look at some of these other matchups, some fun conference play matchups. So we'll see what happens here. Stay tuned. Let us know below if you think there are any matchups that we missed, anything you're excited for. And as always, thanks for tuning in, y'all.